Welcome to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast with your host, legendary powerlifter and strength athlete, Chad Ikes. For most, the journey of strength starts in the gym, but should inevitably expand through all aspects of life. Join us as we discuss all things strength. Now, here's your host, Chad Ikes.
I am back again, and today we have another great guest, Paul Leonard. And if you people don't know, usually I'll have the person on and we'll talk for a little bit, and then we'll kind of go into the podcast. Well, me and Paul already been talking for like 40 minutes, and finally I'm like, that's it, we got to start. So I think this is going to be a great podcast. I think you guys are going to hear a lot of cool stuff, learn a lot of stuff. So Paul basically is been in this sport for a very long time. He's a great historian of the sport. He competed in powerlifting, strongman. You'll probably see him commentating at a lot of different events. He's got a lot of cool things coming up. So Paul, thank you for being on today.
Chad, thank you for having me. It was great to chop it up in the warm-up session as we had
yes
beforehand. We haven't been in the same zip code since Universal Studios
in 2003.
Yeah, it'll be 21 years, and the 21st anniversary of that, I will be in Denver on the mic with the USS Strongman Nationals, compliments of Willie Wessels, the president, and Justin Menning and Kate Menning, the Titan Barbell, running that. So like I'm celebrating strength, but man, that was like we talked about. What a seniors that 2003 at Universal Studios was, right?
Yeah, it was amazing, and that was my first big national event. And like I honestly qualified for it, and I'm like, I'm going. Like I had no expectations of what I would do or how I would finish, and like that was my first event. Like just all the big name guys that were there. It was pretty crazy looking back at it.
Yeah, for those watching, it was when the first official 800-pound bench was done by Scott Mendelson. He did that at that date, and there were numerous. I was in the 308s. I had started reducing weight for my super heavyweight days, and you were in the supers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Brent. It was Gary Frank bombed because I remember seeing him bomb, and I was in the garage putting my squat gear away, and he got in a Cadillac and he headed to the airport. He goes, "I'll see you later." He was on to the next meet because he was on the mission then. That started from his days of he was chasing 2,500 then, all the way up to he's the first powerlifter to go over 2,800. That was his run had begun in the early 2000s.
Yeah, did he? Oh, because it was 25, like 25 or something like that. And yeah, he broke that and just that was actually a really crazy time that I don't know. And this is one of the things where I think if lifters would spend more time kind of looking back at the history of it. Because at that same time, Brent had broken the squat record. And then Brent went all the way up. Goggins beat him to 1,100, but then went up to 1,170. And it was like within these few years, the total record, the squat record, the bench record, like all these records just blew up. It was a crazy time.
Yeah, it was to go back then, that period of time was this past Monday, the 20th, was the 24th anniversary of the first WPO show, because my training partner at the time, Art LeBert, took me to that. So the first WPO show wasn't at the Arnold. It was in Daytona Beach at a really cool theater. And it was streamed on cable, and it was and believe Kieran Kidder, there's a name you know, but that was the first time I had seen him in 10 years because he and I competed as teenagers and juniors in New England. He was from New Hampshire and I was from Massachusetts. So we had done meets back then, going way back. But yeah, powerlifting just absolutely exploded with the creation of the WPO back then. That, you know, you put all the best lifters were competing, would go to the WPO shows, in yourself included, in Columbus, Ohio at the Arnold. I was not in powerlifting at that time. I got out of it at the seniors. That 03 seniors was my last big powerlifting meet because at the time my wife was pregnant with twins and she was due. And I said, hey, we lived in Orange County about an hour from Universal. So anyways, I said, just stay home and rest. And I'm getting ready to come out for my squat. And then I see her out there with all my friends, pregnant as can be. And Everything went okay, but the day after the meet, she went for a doctor's checkup, and they kept her in the hospital for a month. So my life kind of changed on the dime, but everything worked out good. I got beautiful twins. They'll be 21 in July this year, so we got through that. But yeah, that there was such a atmosphere then of the excitement that was. The seniors were exciting like that, and the WPO. We all couldn't wait, because the
Mhm.
WPO would always be like the first week of March in the Arnold. We couldn't wait to see like what was lifted there, what was, would be in the cover of the magazines. It was back then, Chad, remember there was 3 powerlifting magazines. There was Powerlifting USA, there was like Power Mag, and there was Monster Muscle. There was such an interest in the sport. Now things have changed and so forth. The magazines are no more, but and now we have live streams, right?
Yeah.
These things. I'm involved in
You,
those
you
now,
don't
but
have to wait to find out. And even then, you got social media where everybody's posting stuff. Yeah, back then it was
exactly.
a big meet. You're like, oh, the WPO was this weekend, and you're gonna have to wait maybe a month before you find out what actually happened.
Sure. And the WPO's back now. I saw it last year on ESPN, and I
Mhm.
read a little bit about, which is good. I mean, because there's enough channels, there's enough opportunities for people to compete now, and for this to get more publicity and more notoriety and more just eyes on the screen. Like, hey, look at what these incredible things lifters are doing, right?
So let's go back. Let's go over your history a little bit. When did you
Sure.
do your first powerlifting meet?
I was very fortunate. So I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, right? So I loved high school football. Played high school football. Your last game, if you don't make the one game playoff, which is called the Super Bowl, first week of December, it was Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving '85, I played my last game, and I've been lifting weights in accordance with that. So I was lifting at the school, but also at a local YMCA. Remember back in the day, maybe people don't know, YMCA's were really well stocked. They had
Mhm.
good weight rooms back in the 80s. And the Y used to do the Y Nationals, which was a huge meet in Columbus, Ohio. A lot of the famous lifters did it. So I'm at my YMCA a couple weeks after my football career ends, and there's a flyer up. Hey, there's going to be a powerlifting meet here. So powerlifting came to me. It came to my YMCA, and I'm like, me and 2 of my buddies that were from the football team did it. And I did it once and I was hooked. I was like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. Like I
So
love this.
was that like 86 ish or something like that?
January of '86, like a week before the Challenger shuttle blew up. Remember that?
Okay,
Space
yeah, I
shuttle blew
remember
up.
that.
Sadly, like it was like in January of '86, and I was like, oh my goodness, I was 17 years old, and I squatted 315, benched a robust 260, and deadlifted. I never deadlifted before, so I stopped at 405. Didn't even quite bust the 1,000 barrier total, and man, I was like, this is. I just was. I
What
was
did
like,
you weigh in at?
I probably weighed about 225 then, 230 when I
Well,
was
it's
getting
not
out of
too bad
playing
for a
ball.
senior, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was decent sized kid. I mean, in my high school, it was a big deal. If you weren't going to start on the line unless you could bench 250, that was the standard. They bench and squat is what we did, and we had 300-pound benchers. I didn't bench 300 when I was in high school. It took me a while for my bench to come around, and it certainly never did somebody like yourself that did 821. And then we'll get into my history when I trained with Josh Bryant. Like that makes your bench feel quite paltry, but I did beat him once in a meet, so I'll note that. But like I was around a lot of strong people. So if you give me my elevator speech, even in high school, guys, my best friend benched 380. He was one of the best, and all my friends were drug free back then, and clean living kids. He benched 380. He's a judge now in Massachusetts, but a huge Armenian kid, and another one of my friends was squatting over 500. So I was around strong guys,
Mhm.
which I tell everybody the quickest way to get strong is be around strong guys.
Yeah.
So once bitten by the powerlifting bug, and I was in college, and it back then, and even today, the collegiate powerlifting scene is amazing, right? I was, I subscribed to Powerlifting USA immediately, which was our lifeblood. It was all the information in the sport back then, and you knew when the big meets were coming up, and you were like, oh, and you read about these lifters' performance. I mean, the first Powerlifting USA I got, Rick Weil was on the cover. He benched 551 at 181 in a T-shirt at the YMCA Nationals. I was like, wow, like what could be possible? And then that summer, I got the same issue. Was the teen nationals was Anthony Clark.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Clark benched 611 at the teen nationals. I was like,
That's still a team that can bench 6 is still insane.
amazing, and yeah,
It's
but
funny though, because I just got this flash in my head. I haven't even thought about this in years. But yeah, when I first started, you didn't go online to find meets. There wasn't any really. You got your Powerlifting USA and you went to the back of the magazine where it had upcoming meets. And you started looking for something close that you could go to.
yes, yeah, in Powerlifting USA, which I once I became an elite lifter, I got the honor to write for them. Mike Lambert gave me that chance, and he's an amazing man. He did so much for the sport, a visionary, and he really um, he he um, he kept it, as Louis Simmons says, he kept it real. He gave coverage to everything that was legitimate. He legitimized it always, and Powerlifting USA from its inception. So once I started really getting into lifting, a guy I trained with, an older guy, gave me every Powerlifting USA that had been published up to that point because they started printing in 1977. So they started the top 100 list.
Mm-hmm.
And that then once then it became a thing where once a year your weight class, if you were 242, 114 supers, your weight class came out. You couldn't wait to get that
Oh
magazine
yeah,
and see where you ran.
that was a big. When I first started, I tell people it was like I got to find a way to make the top 100. Then I'm like, okay, now I got to make the top 75. Okay, now I got to make the top 50. And I just it was that moving up that list was a huge deal for me.
Yes, and the magazine also would have an annual masters issue. So 40 over and 50 over, they'd have in those different weight classes and age classes, they'd have a ranking. Mike also had the drug free, the ADFPA ranking separately, and then the teens and the collegiate. So that's what, as soon as I started lifting in college, I became totally focused on that, like absolutely obsessed with the and in my case, there was two federations back then. There was the USPF. There was three. There was the USPF, the APF had started in 85, 86, and the ADFPA. So I was an ADFPA lifter. I was a drug-free lifter, and that's how I decided that's how I wanted to live my life at that time. I made my decision. Because in the late 80s, mid-80s, Massachusetts, like any place, was awash in any drug you wanted if you wanted to go down that route. And they weren't federally controlled substances. So, but I knew as a young guy, I said, listen, I love this. I'm going to do this for life. For me to jump on any type of PEDs, first of all, it is illegal in that and I lived at home. I saw my parents work hard for their house. And back in the late 80s, the show Cops was on. You saw these doors getting kicked in and stuff. And I'm like, well, I want to be a cop one day too. I shouldn't get involved in this. And it just made sense to me not to do something like that while your endocrine system isn't fully developed, right? Because
Yes.
23, 24 years old. And I saw a lot of kids hop on that stuff. And in a couple of years, they were messes, and it wasn't a good situation. So yeah, the Powerlifting USA was huge in all our lifters' influence. We carried it. We had it in our gym bags. We had it and I was totally focused when I was in college on the collegiate nationals. That was my goal.
I can't remember. I think I made number 1 actually.
I'll check. I have them all.
Because I don't have a copy of that one, but I think in like 06, 07, something like that. Andy Bolton actually had a higher total. So I figured I was, okay, I'm probably not number 1 in the world, but I think I was number 1 in Powerlifting USA at one point.
I'll look through it. Just the other day, Willie Wessels asked me for his, and I found his. He was the number 1. He wanted to show his son graduated high school.
Yeah, I don't think people know about that either, because like Willie's been running strongman forever, but Willie was strong as shit.
Willie, he on one of the pod, because he sat with us when we broadcast. So I met him at one of his last meets. My first big meet, like you recall your first. My first big meet was the 1996 WPC Can-Ams. So like the North Americans, Can Americans, right, in August 11th of 96. So it was in Vegas. So I had totaled over 1,800 in USPF meets. So I'm like, I'm going to go up to the WPC. So I applied, and they said, okay, you qualify. So I walked in there, and it's like, I turn, and there's Chuck Vogelpool. And I'm a West Side guy. I'm a fan. Now, this is not Chuck Vogelpool you see like when he squatted 1,100. Like I'm so straight, I eat my sausage from the side. But like Chuck was pretty. I looked at him. He looked like a high school. He looked like a high school tailback. I'm like, you're Chuck Vogelpool. He's like, yeah. And back then, like West Side traveled. He wasn't lifting, but Waddle was, and Arnold Coleman was, and I think there was a number. Louis wasn't there, but I'm like, and I was following those West Side guys. I'm like, these guys are like a motorcycle gang. They hang tough. And I was like, and he looked pretty. I was like, man, this guy's damn. You're Chuck. I didn't get a picture with him. I got a picture somewhere with Waddle, but Wessels was at that meet, and he squatted over 1,000. So when I broadcast with him a couple years ago, I said, here's Willie Wessels, 1,000-pound squatter. And Willie's very humble, as you know. He's like, he corrected me. He's like, I squatted 1,000 16 times. So he squatted 1,000 as many times as Ric Flair has been world champ. So when I see Willie now, I say, woo.
That's funny.
We chop it up and have some good times. But yeah, now that I've known Willie, not to go down a rabbit hole, but Willie did go over to strongman. He was 3-time when they started the 231-pound class. Willie won that 3 times in a row, 3 times national champion. So he went from being a world champion powerlifter to the best at the strongman level had 20 years ago. And Chad, he told me, now that once I got to know him, he's like, I did my last one when I was on chemotherapy. He had cancer and he beat it. I mean, Willie's an amazing man. And now the strongman USS, his organization's sanctioned over 1,000 strongman competitions since last year. So like when I see him at the nationals in a couple weeks, we'll sit down. He actually approached me about starting a podcast. So I'll have to get him on here with you.
Oh, I would love to interview Willie. That would be great.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. He knows.
Well, I think we've talked a couple times in the past. Cause I actually went to, they had a strongman event here in Reno. And I was like, oh shit, I haven't seen Willie in forever. And like, I went down there and I'm taking pictures because I go, I'm going to post them on Elite, you know? So I go down there and I'm taking pictures and stuff. And a couple of guys are like, you're not supposed to be here. Who are you? And I'm like, dude, I'm Chad X. Go talk to the Wessels. They don't care. And the guy went and talked to him and he comes back and he's like, yeah, you can go wherever you want.
Yeah. Like not do you know who I am, but usually our appearance belies us, you know, like that. I know that guy did something seriously, but Twisted Steel and sex appeal. But yeah, Willie just bought a house in Phoenix. So he's going to be out here a lot more in this neck of the woods. And we'll have to all get together but yeah, I mean, he's an amazing person. And so yeah, like once so my point of all that is like, in strength, like I'm doing these broadcasting jobs now because I have these relationships that go back years upon years upon years. And just like you find, like once we get back and reconnected, we're just like, oh man, these are our people. We've gone into the regular world and it's sometimes it's not all it's cracked up to be, but we get each other. We're like, oh man, I know what it takes. And I can't, but then again, I can't imagine what it would take to lift the type of weights you did. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's great to connect all these people together. And so yeah, what you were going over my story. So I'm a Khalees. So I'll give you the skinny on it. Like I like to tell. So I'm in college, and I was in Northeastern University, which is at one time it was the largest private university in the United States. It's a school in Massachusetts, and I'm going for it's a university, so it's different colleges, and I'm in the College of Criminal Justice. I mean. Believe it or not, there's been people that competed at World's Strongest Man that went to Northeastern. Remember Remember Ernie Hackett?
Ernie Hackett sounds familiar.
Yeah, he had the world record in the squat at one time. I didn't know Ernie, but he was there before me. Him and his brother he had the world record. He was an IPF world champion in the 275-pound class. And then he tied Kaz in the silver dollar deadlift in 1982. So he went to Northeastern. Yeah, he like growing up in Massachusetts, you and I were talking about legends. Like there was a gym called P&P, which I never went to and it doesn't exist, but that's where Ted Arcidi trained and guys that I know had trained over there. Like you didn't get the invite. It was kind of like the Sopranos card game. Like, that's how I treated my garage at one point, to be honest. People would come up, I want to train at your house later. And I'm like, yeah, I know what I can do. We used to start. I used to see if they could load 100 pounds on the squat bar, right, with our squat stands. Yeah. And if you're probably with all due respect, you're probably going to get hurt. Like put that down if you couldn't figure out how to get the 100 pounds to start, right? So,
You got to
but
earn it.
yeah, somebody, people I trust, I won't repeat anything unless they tell me, but somebody once told me Ernie Hackett tripled 940 in the squat and they had to duct tape electrical tape the weights on, and I believe it because that was a legendary gym. But I'm so glad I grew up in Massachusetts. It was New England was just a myriad of just strong, again, Ted Arcidi and Fred Hatfield was from Connecticut at one point, but like the just the people I saw, and that doesn't even include the bodybuilding realm, the Mike Matarazzos, the Paul DeMeos, later on Jay Cutler. There was a whole bodybuilding scene there, but I was way more into the powerlifting.
Yeah.
And sponsored by a gym, probably like you were now, like early on, like a gym sponsored me, and they flew me to it wasn't the teen nationals, it was the teen, like the ADFPA, it was the East Coast Open. So I flew down there after being a Massachusetts champion as a teen, and I got my ass kicked by a guy named Sean Colbeth, God rest his soul, because Greg Panora told me he died about 10 years ago, sadly, of breast cancer. But Sean, as a teenager, Sean did 2 600-pound bookends and a 480 bench. So he beat me and came in second. So my message to everybody, and we were talking about this earlier, is like some of the ass kickings are the best things I ever got.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Man, that was like, okay, I'm not that strong. So then I put the nose to the grindstone. And I focused heavily on the collegiate nationals, which the ADFPA had a big one. I went to my junior year of college. I went to the Virginia Tech. It was run by a guy named Eric Hammer. It was all over Powerlifting USA. And I ended up coming third in that overall. I squatted 6, bench 365, and I deadlifted the collegiate All-American, the collegiate American and national record. I beat a guy named Randall McDaniel, if that name means anything to you. He's in the NFL Hall of Fame. He played for the Minnesota Vikings. Because like I had a picture. There was a picture of him in Powerlifting USA, of him at ASU in Tempe, in his shorts and a tank top, and you're like, oh, this is the best powerlifter in the collegiate world. And he's out sunning himself, and I was digging my 76 Malibu out of a snowbank. I was like, someday I'm gonna. Oh man, I was so motivated. And I bring that up not to toot my own horn, but when I graduated from college, I was hired of the federal government under the Outstanding Scholar Program as a federal agent because I had good grades in criminal justice. But I also put down that I had that All-American status in the deadlift, and I came in third overall. And my resume was reviewed, my application was reviewed by a guy in Washington, D.C., who grew up in the late 70s and 80s in Ohio, right? And as you know, Larry Pacifico, and there was world championships. He hired me because he said, I knew what a powerlifter was, and I knew that, you had decent grades, but a powerlifter is hardworking. So it led to me getting into the federal government as a collegiate kid, true. Which is I'm always grateful, and nowadays I think people might associate Ohio and West Side, but I don't know where you would really consider a hotbed of powerlifting today, Chad.
I don't know, again, because like with the modern technology and because powerlifting was always considered like this kind of underground sport, and now it's with social media and everything. I think and then of course with the CrossFit, it gained a huge amount of popularity to where. And I talk with some of my training partners. We talk about how different it was when guys were wearing more gear, because you kind of needed a team, and you can train raw. You can get really good raw by yourself. Like, I mean, you can get good in gear by yourself, but it's a difficult thing. And so it does. I don't hear about the big gyms. The individual gyms producing so many people. There's just such a wide variety of people all over the place now, where I don't think you have those localized areas anymore.
Yeah, and you know what I see with that, my observation, because I'm a member of a gym here, and I see the gym culture. Now, these gym have key fobs, right, that you can go 24/7, 365. When I was growing up, there was an urgency. You needed to be at the gym with the powerlifters by 6 at night, because most of them worked. And then Saturday morning, you walked into a powerlifting gym in Massachusetts, anywhere really in the United States in the 80s, they were getting it on because that's when a meet was. And that's usually people had the time off. I was shocked when I relocated to Dallas in 2004, and there were some fantastic gyms. And there's one called Stroud's, and a lot of lifters at that gym, dumbbells to 200. That's where Steve Goggins trained with Ronnie Coleman. And you'd recognize the owner passed away since I moved, but Stroud's gym was amazing. But I was like, okay, I have to work Monday through Friday. And I was friends with Johnny Jackson, the bodybuilder, the pro bodybuilder. He won World's Strongest Pro Bodybuilder. He's like, hey, let's train. And he's like, I train every day at 11. I'm like, man, John, I got a job. I can't do that. But nobody was training Saturday mornings. And this is going back 20 years. I'm like, well, if you don't train Saturday mornings, like, how do you feel when you go to squat at like 11 o'clock at a meet, you know? And so there's not that urgency, and there's certainly not crews. Cause I look back, Chad, and like you interviewed my friend, Josh Bryant. I don't live in the past, but man, my best days were when I built my garage gym out and I had 7 guys who could, everybody could deadlift 700 on a Texas power bar. Everybody could bench 400 raw. Everybody could squat 700 with just knee wraps and a belt. I mean, we were strong, but it was the fun we had afterwards. It was going out to eat. It was traveling to meets. You know, it was just the bullshitting in the gym and the busting chops and the inside jokes and we were all serious as could be. There was 2 hours. We were just going to hammer it out, but it was just, the process was just amazing. And I tell anybody, again, you want to be stronger, find stronger people. Right. And we had such an environment out there in Southern California at my place in Orange County that Josh Bryant used to drive 140 miles from Santa Barbara just to squat with us because we were that serious. But at the same time, we were positive. You weren't going to train at my place and not put it on the platform, you know, and not go towards something that, you know, that was, we looked at it as like, it was just, contests were easy compared to our training sessions. Our training sessions were brutal, right? Like you were, but it was going to count. You were going to go to the nationals. You were going to go, you know, we went to the nationals. We went to the WPO. Art did, Josh did, like, and then eventually I branched off into strongman, but everybody that trained there was just super strong, but it was, the camaraderie was amazing.
Even now when I train, I have a couple groups. I train probably more individual stuff, but like you can see when you get the groups together, how as an individual, you can have kind of up and down days, but if you got a group, overall, the group's going to lift you up every single time. And you always have somebody who's pushing you or somebody that you want to beat. And I think, the atmosphere, I think, makes for better training sessions and the consistency. Like, if you don't show up, they're going to bust your balls. Like, you have, and you should have a responsibility to, like, hey, even if I'm deloading this week, I'm going to go because I need to help these guys with loading and I need to help with spotting and I need to motivate them even if I'm not there that day. And I think it just creates a much better consistency and intensity overall.
Yeah, I think back to those days, and because it was at my house, in my garage, I hosted it. I certainly did leave it in the gym somewhat. Like like Josh was 20, 21. Art LeBaire was closing in on 40. Brian Meek was in his early, God rest his soul, was in his early 50s. George Pessel was in his early 40s. Like I was like, in retrospect, I should have, every week I wanted to win. Mm-hmm. I was like, I want to win this garage. That's all I care about. Like it was, I mean, I did a 740 box squat with just my suit down and my briefs on and knee wraps and a belt with 740 to a 12-inch. My best competition squat, I stood up with 855 at Universal Studios, but I lost it 2-1 on depth. I normally squatted low, but I did leave stuff in the gym, but I learned a lot too. And we were super strong. Like that's all I cared about, was walking around strong at 24/7. I mean, I was, again, I began my law enforcement career. I had been a fat super once for like 6 months, my last year in Massachusetts, because we didn't like the super heavyweight that was going to win the state title. So my buddy was kind of burned out. He's like, man, get up. I gained 60 pounds in like 3 months, and it was weight gain. It was terrible. It was like that episode of The Simpsons when he weighs himself in and he's trying to get to 300 because he's obese.
Yeah.
And he looks his fat's stuck in the towel racks, and he moves it, and the scale goes to like over 300. He's like, "Oh, I did it."
I just remember Dr. Nick holding up a piece of paper and rubbing fried chicken on it, and the paper gets clear, and he goes, "That's your window to weight gain."
Yeah, so I did get fat once, but for the most part, I coupled my powerlifting with I stayed pretty functional because I knew when college ended, I was going to have to start my law enforcement career. I didn't know exactly where. At the same time, Massachusetts economy went to crap, and there was no job. So two of my friends moved to California, and I said, "Man, I'm going out there. There's all kinds of law enforcement jobs." So I moved out there, got hired by LAPD, got hired by LA sheriffs, and I was going to start working with them. And then the federal government called me up and liked my application. So I started with them in September of 91. So I'd been in California for a couple months, and I loved it. I loved being out in California. I loved my experience out there. I had so many things I can talk about. I mean, at first, so for example, the first gym we lived in this little rat hole apartment across from the LA County Sheriff's Academy. So there was a gym across from that, and it's a quintessential California gym, all kinds of glass windows, sort of from floor to ceiling. I walk in there, and I see Roy Liedermeyer. I don't know if you know if anybody knows who Roy Liedermeyer is. Like,
I'm not
he's like,
familiar.
in the late 80s, he'd been famous for being in Sports Illustrated. He was training Tony Mandarich, the
Okay.
football player who was like one of the most heralded draft picks ever. And
Yeah.
now he's my friend. He's my friend on social media. We trade messages. He's out here in Scottsdale, so I'll meet him one day. But I walked into this gym, and I was like, Rory was well over 300 pounds. And by many accounts, including one of my closest training partners, they saw Rory bench 600 raw. Rory was like 320 pounds of muscle that I'd never seen before. I'd never seen anything like that. The nicest guy in the world, because he's closing in on 70 now. So if anybody looks him up online, he's got a great Instagram and some YouTube content. He's a great guy. So that was like the first guy I saw. I was like, oh my goodness, look at this. Look at, like, I'd never seen a human like that. Well, I take that back. I'd seen Ted Arcidi. Ted, the first
Yeah.
guy to bench 700. I'd seen Ted twice. I'd seen him in '88. I was working for GNC, and they said, "Hey, go help Ted with a exhibition for his supplement." And I went up, and he really didn't impress me in person that much. I was like, "Ooh!" And then I saw him in '90, 2 years later, when he benched 718, and he took his shirt off, and I was like, "Wow!" I'd never seen an upper body like that. Like, to this day, I was like, never. And a couple years later, everybody knows this name probably. When I was living in Southern California, I became a member of a gym called American Eagle. So Rich Schoenberger, God rest his soul, he just passed, and CT Fletcher were members there. So I walk into this gym, and there's two 600-pound raw benchers. And if you've never met CT, you can see this. I have a YouTube channel, Paul L. So that's all it is Paul L. There's a YouTube clip of when Rich benches 611 at the 95 Cal States, USPF Cal States, and CT hugs him. And when I say CT's arms are, because your arms were probably 22, 23 inches when you got at your biggest, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I got to 325 and was measuring for a bencher, mine were like over 21. CT's arms had to have been 27. Like, you had to see it to believe it. So right from the get-go in California, I got to see all these crazy, like just famous lifters. Roy was one of the most famous bodybuilders that never turned pro, but everybody in the bodybuild world knows him. And these guys were just built like amazing. And I was like, wow, this is kind of neat. But there was no real good powerlifting gym when I first moved out there, to be honest with you. It's so spread out, right? You've obviously been in Southern California, 20 million people. And I had my career to worry about, which was my concern, was career. So yeah, then I joined a gym called Uptown Fitness in Whittier, which was Rory was at that gym. And that's where I started back with kind of my powerlifting journey, if you will, and then you're talking the early mid 90s. And then I kind of stagnated at like a 1,600-pound total. And then I found the West Side tapes. The original West Side Barbell tapes came out in 93 with Louis Simmons explaining how to do the dynamic effort and the repetition effort and the max effort.
Mm-hmm.
And I took to that like a duck to water, because I had to, with my career, I had to do a lot of training on my own. So as we were talking about before we went hot, like the dynamic squat day, 12 doubles, that was literally 10 minutes of terror. That was literally a fist fight, right? Like, and I started off, I had been squatting 600. So I started off low. I started off with like 275, going down to like a 12-inch box. And man, it shaved fat off me that I'd been accumulating. I hadn't been dieting correctly, really. And it put me in shape, right? Like, if you've ever, I know you've done some West Side dynamic work.
I did almost all, like my biggest numbers were all doing Westside conjugate training.
Yeah, I love the conjugate training, and like to this day, Matt Wenning and Burley Hawk provide some information on it. You know, it's not it to me. It's very applicable for any style of powerlifting. Not, I mean, I know they were affiliated with gear um, competitions primarily, but the strength that I got from doing West Side was like unlike any other. It put so much more work into your workout, and Louis talked about that, like, being SPP specific, GPP and SPP, and being in shape and being conditioned and being a strength athlete. It really was the missing piece in how to build, for me, how to build my body, and it's not for everybody. You got to figure out. One of the things I found was, for me, at being 6'2" and a half, and I have a long back, like my inseam in my pants was not even 32. Like, good mornings weren't for me. Power good mornings were that movement where you go about 4 inches over.
Yeah.
That helped me. That builds static strength in your back for squatting. But regular good mornings weren't it for me. But like Louis would tell you, like, if there's $1 million out in the parking lot and there's under some rock, you're going to turn over every rock that you can find till you find that money, what works for you. Like, you had to figure out what worked for you in the conjugate system, but there was definitely something for everybody.
Well, I think
And
that's a lot of people want to do, and I think this is a kind of an issue with today's access to knowledge. People want to be told what to do. Well, what is the program? Well, I've always saw conjugate as an outline. It's rules and principles to follow, but you got to learn how to bend them. And I've had football players get a lot of success out of conjugate. I mean, I've trained a lot of different people with different levels of conjugate, and it always works. Like,
yeah,
you need repetition strength, you need speed strength, you need max strength. It's going to work them all. It just depends on how you're going to put it together, and depending on what the person needs.
Yeah, 100%. And you see, Louis was a lot like me when I got to California. He said he didn't, for a while, he didn't have some training partners. He just had a radio and a squat and a power rack, and that was, I didn't always have. It took me a few years to find the best partners, and I had to perform well. Once I came in second in the Cal States to the great Steve Dennison, who's now the USPA president, who has hired me to broadcast their drug tested nationals in Vegas the last week of June. So check me out over there. But, Steve Dennison was a stalwart, but I beat some guy named Micah Hearn.
Some guy.
I guess he's some type of influencer now.
He's like a fitness guy.
You never did a meet again. If you look at openpowerlifting.org, you never did it again. I don't know why. I mean, but after I did that meet, then like Art LeBear noticed, and Gary Garcia noticed, and Brian Meek, like, man, this kid's, I was younger than them, but like, man, this guy's serious. I just had to buy a house and then start buying my equipment, and getting my life in order. And then it was a great joy to me to buy equipment. Like, if you lived this is pre-Craigslist for everybody listening to this. So did you up in where you were from, did you guys have the penny saver?
Yes.
Like, okay.
I remember we had that back in the Midwest, I think.
Yeah, California had 5 editions of it from the 5 counties: LA, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Ventura. So Ventura was kind of far, but I would start my Fridays off on the new edition. I'd go to the same 7-Eleven where I'd always buy milk and food and like be eating it. And I would just open the penny saver to the equipment ads and write down information. And the guy's like, "You never buy?" I go, "Well, I buy food." And I would call the places up, and that's how I kind of built my first gym. I bought equipment like secondhand, like a Gold's Gym closed out in the Inland Empire. And I fit everything I could in my Ford Escort. I turned in my Mustang when I got serious about lifting to eat more. And I was driving a Ford Escort. When I said I put 10 45-pound plates in that, and bars, stuff I still have, Chad, to this day is made in America, you know? And I can, if I walk around my gym, I look at it, and it's in its fourth iteration. It's in its fourth house now, but that's my garage, you know, and I love it. You know, there's stories to tell, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a set of dumbbell bars that Art LeBear gave me that Bill Kazmaier used to use, because, you know, Bill lived in Southern California and used to train with Terry McCormick and Dave Shaw, were his mentors and were Art's mentors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was at, as you see in my book I gave you, and we can talk about that. I wrote an ebook that I'd like to help anybody with. If you DM me after this podcast at my Instagram, just put Chad Ikes in the DM and I'll sell it to you for $10 for 117 pages. But there's a picture of me in there at Roger Estep's wedding. You know, Roger Estep, to this day, they find pictures of him. God rest his soul. You know, unfortunately he passed, but I mean, you know, that guy was touted in 1900 at 198 with just ace bandages and a belt, you know, like 500. I mean, the people I got to be around in California, it was priceless. I'll never trade that for anything.
Well, I think, I mean, going back over my career powerlifting, you know, I started on my own. I started reading magazines and trying to get information there. But I mean, my education didn't really start for me until I started meeting and getting to spend time with some of the top guys. And then just being around them, kind of learning their mindset, how they look at things, and then getting like one-on-one actual information. Not that somebody told you about somebody, but you're actually sitting there talking to them. You know, like a guy like Chuck Vogelpohl. I get to meet Chuck Vogelpohl and I actually get to talk training with him. Not what people tell me he did, but actually from him what he did. You know, that was a huge education for me right there.
Yeah, that's what I always looked upon myself. I'm always fascinated with the training, like what we talked about before we recorded this, our preamble, if you will, our talk. But like that's what I thought I was going to do once I retired from being an agent, was like a training editor, like for powerlift. Like I want to know how Chad Ikes got strong, so I'm fascinated with that. I could talk. That's my focus. Like, how did you get strong? What did you do? What didn't work? What worked for you? And when I wrote for Powerlifting USA, and I did write for Mark Bell's Power Mag, he never paid me for my 4 articles, so they exist. But be that as it may, Mike Lambert was the direct opposite. You wrote an article for Mike Lambert. There was a check for $500 and 2 cases of magazines.
Yeah.
And then he would send you pictures out of the blue like that. I regret not going to Mike's shop before he closed up, because supposedly his office just had a treasure trove of powerlifting information that pictures we'd never. Pictures I would, yeah. Hopefully it's at the Stark Library in Austin, right? Like it went to the right place.
I did one of the last interviews I did. I came home one day and there's 2 boxes on my porch, and I'm like, "What the hell is this?" And he sent me like 2 boxes of the magazine I was in.
All class. Mike Lambert, he loved the sport, and if you know, Mike was I have the old issue. So when the pandemic happened, I was contacted by the people that run openpowerlifting.org, track me down.
Mm-hmm.
I had social media. I had YouTube and Instagram, the only social medias I've had, if you will. And they tracked me down and they said, "Hey, we're trying to create our fill out our records here." So I had time during the pandemic. We were all working from home. I took photocopies of Powerlifting USA from 77 to 1979. The first 3 years were small, like they were like 5x7.
Mm-hmm.
I took I copied all those and sent them to those guys, and they thanked me profusely, because they need to update their records. Because, you know, as you know, like, I love that site exists. I don't know those people by names, and they haven't been in contact with me now in about 3 years. But out of my own, I just said, yeah, you need the history of this. I made copies of those magazines and sent them, because that's the records of powerlifting, right? And yeah, Mike Lambert, he always did. He was the record keeper, and he really legitimized the sport by documenting it correctly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
well, that was even when I started. Yeah, open powerlifting. I look at my name under there, and there's a lot of meets that they don't have that I did. But like it was
right.
When you couldn't wait to, even when you did your competition, you were waiting for the episode or the issue to come out where you could see your results, like in the magazine, and like even if it was a local meet, you're all pumped up because you're like, dude, that meet's in the magazine and my total's in there.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't. Now, I think that's kind of lost on this generation that there's such a proliferation with social media. You see everything, you see footage, but time marches on. But yeah, that was a special moment when at my collegiate meet that I became All-American in. That was that group picture was in PLUSA. I have that. It was like, I'm so proud of that. It was amazing. Like it was. I did it in March, the lift in March, but it was in July. But man, that was definitely the summer of love. I'm like, man, I'm a national level athlete. I busted
Yeah.
my ass. No one can take that from me. Oh yeah, and because I I've had a few pictures in there myself, and obviously results. I'm trying to think. You have been on the cover for sure. Yes.
I think I was on the cover of like Body Tech. I don't know if I was on the cover of Powerlifting USA.
I'm trying to. Okay. Now I know.
I'm really bad about my own history.
Okay.
Because at
Yeah.
the time I was always looking for the next thing.
Oh, I know.
So
I
even
know
when
what
I
it's like.
did something, I'm notorious for not celebrating, but already like moving on to what's my next goal.
Sure. No, I've been there, and there was a time where I always read Powerlifting USA, but once I left California, I moved to Texas to focus more on family and cost of living and all that good stuff. Like I would get Powerlifting USA in the mail. I always read it, but yeah, there's times where you're just like you didn't even appreciate it. You were too much. In my case, I really got to the point I really focused on my career once my kids came along. Not that I didn't before, but uh, the way it happened was for example, I did my first strongman contest September 9th, 2001 at Jamestown, Railtown up there. They had it wasn't California's strongest, but we got to pull a train. By then I was training strongman because I had hurt my knee in squatting in San Luis Obispo at the Central Cal. So I met Kevin Kinsey and Charlie Captor, if you know those guys.
The
They
names, I
were
know the names.
Yeah, Kevin they were both high level strength Highland Games athletes, but then Charlie became a pro strongman at the turn of millennium. So I did my first strongman contest on September 9th, 2001. The next day was a Monday, and I had a 9-month-old at home. My wife was staying at home at the time with the kids, and I was on the next day, Tuesday, 9/11. I picked up my partner in Diamond Bar. I lived in Yorba Linda. We were driving in, and my boss raised us on the radio. He goes, I don't know what's going on, but don't come to the federal building. Don't come to the office. The world's under attack. And it was September 11th. So I kind of picked a crummy time to start in strongman because as a federal agent, I got really busy for the next 2 to 3 years because I was tracking down people that were defrauding the immigration system.
Yeah.
And so work really intensified for me, and then for a myriad of reasons. And then in 2003, I had twins. So the seniors where I last saw you at was kind of I'm like, man, after this, my work was super busy, and it was important because I think we held off a lot of attacks on the homeland, but that's neither here nor there. But my powerlifting was always in the back of my mind. And I would always tell people there's always time to strength train. You know what I'm saying? Even it's for you, even if you don't do it at the level there was a time where you see these movies where people turn into a werewolf.
Yeah.
There was a time after my career, like 7:00 at night, I would just kind of be itchy and looking around like, hey, where's Josh? Where's Art? Aren't we supposed to be lifting heavy? But again, by then I was at my kids' activities. My kids all did sports activities from jujitsu to varsity football to my daughter did music and volleyball and all these good things. Those were important. But
yeah.
when I moved over here to Arizona, Richie Wenner, who had Brian Shaw as one of his grad students at ASU. Richie Wenner was an IPF. He's got to be in the IPF Hall of Fame. He was a fantastic power lifter, and he was a strength coach at ASU, but he was the state chairman for ADFPA. So when I qualified for that after being clean for 3 years, I immediately went over to that and started doing the raw meets because I could just train for it in my garage in the morning before work and before my work was established. I was a supervisor, and my kids were doing the things later in the day. So And I would have one heavy day on the weekend on Sundays where I'd have people over the garage and we do the heavy squat just to get used to squatting in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But it fit, and I was able to go and do ADFPA, which that was the federation. It was kind of full circle, Chad. You know, I did it all.
Yeah.
I made a point at one point in my career. I had to, in order to protect myself as a federal agent, I had to do everything legal. So I found what was the predecessor for TRT. Now everybody knows what TRT is. Well, you go back over 20 years ago, and there was even President Bush talked about steroids in his address of the nation. So I don't know. My perspective on this is do everything legal. And so I found doctors that were helpful in Southern California that I was doing TRT by my late 20s, right? I was supplementing with testosterone because they did their blood work and they said, okay, you can qualify because that's the legal requirement.
Right.
So I did that, and I enjoyed competing in the open, and I was following Westside Barbell. And then there came a time where I just said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just went clean, if you will, and qualified for the ADFPA. So if and did that and had a lot of fun with that for 3 or 4 years. And then that kind of dried up. Then my kids were in high school and I couldn't have been busier. There was, they need to stay up and do their thing, and you're giving them rides and stuff. And
Yeah.
sleep we could talk about sleep, I think, next, because I was sleep challenged like you for a lot of years. And, but not in the way you describe you've suffered from it way worse than me. I would have 1 or twice a month where a night I wouldn't sleep and I'd be mad. I'd just lay there, but I would sleep the next night. It would come over me. But yeah, if you've touched upon your sleep, and I saw your post yesterday on Instagram, my friend. You're starting to get some better sleep, I think.
Yeah, well, I had I overtrained a lot in my heavy days, and that was one of the huge triggers to send my sleep spiraling down. So now I try to regulate it more. I mean, I still have narcolepsy and there's no cure for it. So it is what it is, but I can definitely regulate it and try to keep it the best I can. Where if I can put enough time in bed, if I can get 10 or 11 hours in bed, I can get about 6 hours of sleep. And unfortunately, that's only a couple minutes of deep sleep, but it might be an hour, hour and a half of REM, which for me is pretty good. I mean, it's still not anywhere near enough, but I can function and live on it. So, but I think sleep's one of the biggest things that I see, especially people who, if you want to lose weight, you got to get your sleep, man. If you want to lean down, you got to get your sleep. If you want to be stronger, you got to get your sleep. But the caveat to that is, and the whole time I'm saying this, I'm going, but I got strong as shit. And when I was at my peak, I was awake for 2 to 3 days at a time.
Wow.
And then when I did sleep, it was horrible sleep. It was a few hours the next night. Then I would be up for, the longest I was ever up was before, I think it might have been one of the APF seniors in Vegas. I was up for like 11 days.
Wow.
No, did like an 1100 something squat. And then I actually went down with like 1173 or something like that. But so like I tell people, take advantage of everything you can, but in the end, your mind is so powerful that your mindset should always be your main focus.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you. Upon the advent, when I got to Southern California, and again, when I said I was an ADFPA lifter in Massachusetts, I won the men's state open once, but I was a collegiate national level lifter. But for example, the first time, now I worked for GNC and I could take any product I wanted there, but I never took anything for energy. They would sell different things. The first time I took a caffeine pill, I was 25 years old. I was living in Southern California. I was training at American Eagle. I was kind of sluggish, and this guy's like, "Hey, do you take caffeine?" I go, "No." I don't like coffee to this day. So I took a caffeine pill. I go, "Wow, that works." I had never, not that I was pure as the driven snow, but I just was like, I don't think I need it. I love to lift, but once I started down that road with that of caffeine, and of course I'd say I have adult brain. I was a federal agent. I started in 91. I had to be to work 5 days a week, usually daytime. But my shift varies and my assignments varied and my travel, all that stuff varied, right? So I had to answer the bell and be cognizant and all that good stuff at work. It was serious. My job was primarily, I was investigating. I was always internal affairs. So I was investigating first internal affairs with Department of Justice officials and then Homeland Security. But people don't realize the landscape in the 90s, like when I was training, and that's when ephedrine came around.
Mm-hmm. And
And
you could buy it
ephedrine,
over the counter.
I mean, 2 dimethadrines, you're good for about 8 hours. You're like, it's the tighter you get, your body makes more oxygen. And I was always undergoing drug tests and physicals, and I cared about my health. Really cared about my health, and still do, and always was like, okay, I don't want to do anything that's deleterious to my health. Like when I was born, I got my last rites. I almost died. I was really sick. My lungs weren't properly formed, but then my family loved me and supported me, and like I lived, and then I thrived. Then I got really strong. Good food, and I was a good sleeper. I was a really good sleeper till I became an adult. Once I
Mm-hmm.
became an agent, I had adult brain, and I was living in Southern California. The commute. I killed myself half the time with long commute. One time, from 96 until '04, my commute was 42 miles one way because I wanted to live in Yorba Linda and my office was in Glendale. So kind of stubborn, but I wanted to live where I wanted to live,
Yeah,
right? So
42
I commute
miles, but how long did that take you to drive?
at least 2 hours. And if it rained, forget it. But you would try to find work out in the field, right? If you know what you're doing. Like sometimes I'd work it down in Orange County. I'd work all over Southern California. And I traveled. I've seen 37 states. So work would take me different places. But like what we're getting at is like, yeah, I got sleep. I really got sleep addled for a while too. My sleep started sucking. And then I bought a house with a pool. And nowadays they have these fancy, like, and they talked about it even in the bodybuilding magazines like Frank Zane and stuff, like these float tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Before I had kids and I had my pool with a raft on and like headphones, I could fall asleep in my pool after a squat day. Like we'd squat for like 2.5 hours from 9 to about 11:30, then go eat some Mexican food. And usually sometimes my buddies would join me. We'd lay on floats and I could fall asleep. I'd fall asleep for hours in my pool. Halfway through, I put on this, I didn't want to get skin cancer or something. I'm Irish German. So I would cover up, but I'd fall asleep like a baby in my pool for like 2 hours. And it was very refreshing. No
It's
kids, you know what I'm saying?
almost a form of meditation.
Yeah, totally. And but then Chad, wouldn't it infuriate you? Sometimes I'm like, okay, it's Sunday night, 10 o'clock. I got to be up tomorrow at 6. I got to be in Glendale by 8. I got to work, and just be staring like I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I tried everything. And I had my wife was very supportive. Like this is a podcast, so we'll stay family friendly, but I see now these people talking about, oh, this is dude, is it any more sophisticated than a blowjob and a back rub? I mean, you can put a cold plunge in your, I mean, be in a loving relationship. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, you can be in I tried that cold plunge when I had my own pool. That's bullshit. Like, no way. I would go in cold water, and it was like I would get sick. In California, it doesn't get that cold, right?
Yeah.
The water gets down to the 40s. I'm like, oh, I read about this in Milo. The Russians go. I tried it for like a week. I go, this sucks. Now, if I had inflammation and
I like cold plunges.
I mean, it's to each their own. But I did like this. I liked the extremities in it. I liked sitting on the edge reading a book, and I'd put up to my knees into it.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the stick and berries weren't in there, and the organs, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if my upper body was sore, I'd lay over the edge. I'd get sun on my back even in the winter, and my shoulders and arms would be in it. But putting in my internal organs, I tried that. I'm like, it refreshed you.
But
it woke you up. In the grand scheme of things, I'm like,
you know what's interesting about this is you said you read in Milo back in the day that the Russians were doing this. Like, you look at social media now and it's like, oh, we had this great idea. We're going to do cold plunges. And it's like, yeah, it was done like 50, 60 years ago. They were doing that. This is not new information, people.
Yeah, not at all. Like, and took me some cold water, like contrast showers feel great.
Mm-hmm.
They wake you up, but it's a case by case basis. Don't get me wrong. But like,
I think I think the contrast shower is probably one of the best. And we used to do some of that in college and in physical therapy. And I remember, because of my sleep, doing multiple day events are hugely hard on me. So I was doing the Highland Championships in Pleasanton,
Oh
which is
yeah, the king, the big one.
a 2-day event. And I'm like, dude, I'm screwed tomorrow. Like, what am I going to do? And it actually happened to be pretty cold down there. So I went out in the hotel, had a pool and a hot tub. So after my first day, I did the pool and the hot tub and did like a contrast. It worked so beautifully. It was my best second day event ever.
Nice. Yeah, I in California I had a pool hot tub combo, and I loved. Again, I love the hot tub. It was a novelty for me. And I didn't grow up with a pool. I grew up very not lower class, but we were working class folks. So like the things I experienced and I was able to buy for myself were amazing. And like I'm a big fan. I've listened to a lot of the stuff Stan Efferding, and we're online pals, if you will. And
Mm-hmm.
he loved that I beat Micah Hearn because he makes some video. Ask Micah Hearn. Everyone likes to. Everyone to this day, people bring that up. They're like, "Man, you beat that guy."
I can see where Stan would like that. Yeah.
Oh, he likes that. It sticks up, and I have the footage. The footage is on my YouTube, Paul L. So you can see where I pull the deadlift to beat him. But be that all as it may, like the stuff Stan talks about, like that stuff you do for your body is far better than stuff done to it. Because I'd watch those NFL shows or pregame shows or the UFC shows we were talking about. They'd show with these fighters all this. Like I had deep tissue therapy for my shoulders, and it was amazing. Dr. Joseph Horrigan did it, and he really saved my rotator cuffs. But those were only like 15 treatments back in the mid to late 90s when I was in SoCal. But like Stan will say, like, yeah, massage and all this like infrared and sauna and stuff. It's like all this stuff isn't totally necessary versus the simple stuff he espouses, the 10-minute walks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing that stuff before Stan talked about it. I mean, my plan was to get as big as possible. The biggest I got, Chad, was 325 when I was 30, because for a year and a half, I was on a congressional project where I didn't have to work the streets. I just had to write and interview people for a special Congress thing. So I'm like, okay, this is my time. I have no kids. I'm married. I got money. Let me get as big as I could. So it was all about food, right? Like Larry Pacifico says, like you should be spending $300 a week on groceries and $50 on toilet paper. Figure it out. If you want to get, food is the ultimate. Nowadays, like these kids will ask me in the gym, they'll say, what about peptides? I'm like, what about Fairlife? That's super milk that they strained all the lactose out so you could drink. How many eggs have you eaten today, kid?
Well, I think that's, well, first of all, I know Matt Wenning, I think he just got together with Stan and they're doing like a 2-hour like longevity kind of thing, which I think is great.
Yes.
I love Stan, and I follow the vertical diet kind of loosely because I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder. So if I want ice cream, I'm gonna have ice cream. But I think there's a lot to just eat more, walk more, stay healthy. Like you got to maintain health. And I know, like in my day, if you were a super heavyweight, you didn't give two shits about health. You had that attitude of, if I die under a squat bar, so what, as long as it's big, and that's, I don't think that's the best way to actually get strong either. I think I'm 52 and I have no knee problems, no shoulder problems. I had one back issue that I've already fixed because it was an imbalance, and now I'm just gaining the strength back. I mean, that's the goal. Lift a bunch of heavy weights, become an amazing lifter, and then be healthy as you get older, where you can continue to lift the rest of your life.
Yeah. That's what I made the decision to. And when you contacted me through Instagram first, and you're like, hey, you complimented me, like, hey, you look great. You look like that. So I opened my eyes once. Well, I started losing weight when I got to 325 and when I turned 30. So slowly I started losing weight, and like, I didn't like cardio, but when I went over to the strongman world, like when I tried out to become a pro in Boston in 2002, Willie was there, and a guy named Scott Popisil won the amateurs. It was a pro-am, but I'm there, and I'm 6'2", like 295. Because when strongman started in the U.S., what it did was Chad Coy and those guys in the Midwest in Indiana, like Chad Coy and Brian Neese and Brian Schoenfeld. They were realizing there was a lot of heavy powerlifters, so they put a lot of medleys into the strongman at first. So my medley in Boston was a 750 yoke, for 100 feet, then a 750 drag backwards 100 feet. And I did that in under 2 minutes. I mean, my life passed before my eyes. But training for that really, Chad, I was in my early 30s. I had one child then. But training with that cardio really helped me. So like what you said now, yeah, back in the old days, there was a thing like the West Side would even, some of the West Side guys, well, we don't even deadlift. Well, now you see right now, for example, I tell people in 2003, there was only less than 10 people in the world that had deadlifted 900.
Mm-hmm.
Like Bill Kazmaier hadn't done it officially. Like Andy Bolton had, and you know him and Gary traded it. But now look at what the deadlift is. Why do you have that? Well, what you have now is the hybrid athlete, who do strongman, who do powerlifting as well, like the Zydrunas Savickas and Eddie Hall. So like powerlifting, and I'm guilty of it. You probably did it too. Like we got real lazy. Man, I hit 3 big squats today. Well, a strongman workout, how many times did you bend your legs against resistance? If you did, if you drug, and sometimes we do volume dragging. We're like, okay, we're going to do 500 feet of dragging today, light. We're going to do 200 pounds for 3 sets of 200 or something. Like same thing with yoke. So I did a lot of conditioning. When I look back now, at first I was pissed at it, but then I'm like, man, it shaved off all the fat and it built my cardio up such that I've never had an issue. I've always been healthy. I've always worked with doctors. I've always done my blood work. I've always had my own personal physician, but at the same time too, I used to have government physicians that were looking at me with a skeptical eye. They're like,
right.
And if there was an issue, including taking your blood pressure, because I tell people to say what it is. Like, for us strength athletes, we shouldn't say blood pressure. We used to laugh about it, right? If you were red or purple, kind of right, and joke a little bit about it. Well, say what it is. Say it's kidney damage, because that's what it is. High blood pressure is kidney damage, you know?
Yeah, that's one of the things I look back, and I tell, but I don't look back over my career. I mean, it was cool and it was fun. I mean, I'm moved on. I'm doing other things, you know, but I still like to look back and go, what could I have done better? Because I coach people and I help people, and I want to. So I look over that, and yeah, it was. I mean, back in my heyday, it was like lift super super heavy and then rest. And I mean, I was actually in good shape for my size still, because. And I say for my size. So like I was in good shape for 385 pounds, with quotes, but I still hiked and still went out and did some stuff. But I mean, I knew super heavyweights that couldn't get through the airport without stopping and resting.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's great. But are you really at your strongest? Are you really recovering at your best if you can't even do that? You know, I think there is some balance to, like, no, you still need to maintain a certain level of fitness.
Oh, 100%. You know, I did suffer some injuries, but during that time too, mind you, I'm still a law enforcement officer. So I had to work out in the field, and I had to do firearms qualifications. In 2006, I was 38, and we had an agent killed. A friend of mine was killed. Buddy Setner was killed at the Tallahassee Federal Prison the first day of summer. And then we had another agent. This was when I was still with Department of Justice. Another agent was assaulted inside a prison in Chicago. So they said, "Oh, we got to train you guys better." So there's a training course they called Law Enforcement Control Techniques. So I was 38 years old, been on the federal government 17 years. So they sent me back to Brunswick, Georgia, to do a month course, and it was a month course where they had guys. They had hired former Navy SEALs to come in. They beat the hell out. Like it was a grind up. People were getting concussions in the course. It was a fight. It was fight for your life. And it was really a rite of passage. And it put me in, I couldn't believe the cardio shape I was in, because I had to fight and wrestle and do, you know, and you're a big guy anyways. You show up there. So everybody wanted a piece of you.
Yeah.
So I had that. I had all these instances. I look back in my career where I had like reasons personally or professionally, I got in better shape.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it takes. Like what you're talking about. Like I saw, you know, as a big fan, and I'm sure you're friends with Ed Cohen. I'm friends with Ed, like, you know, and he's like guys like him and Dave Tate and stuff, like these people getting these hip injuries and replacements. So like I started figuring out in my early 30s, like we moved to a different office building, and this office building had 6 floors. It was a 12-story building. So we were on the 6th floor. So every time I would go back to my office, I'd walk the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And that just like, and it was air conditioned in there, so you didn't get all sweaty even if you were shirt and tie. I would do that, and then our parking structure was ramps. So I started every day walking up the ramps backwards, like hit your hips from a different location and hit them from like kind of what Matt Wenning talks about, different stress points, treat your body differently. And like, because I've been like you, I didn't want to be incapacitated. And then I had a job to do for my country. I took an oath, and then I had my family.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got back to doing powerlifting, Chad, like in the ADFPA, the meets were always in Phoenix. So we'd go up there. There was still a 275-pound class, which is funny because they retired that. So all my records still stand because they went to 264. So you can still punch me up like, oh, so I go there.
Wait a minute. How did I not hear about this? They don't have a 275. They have a 264
They were
and then
trying
like
to get
a
in
308.
They just have 264, then super. That's why you have like Ray Williams.
Really?
Yeah, that's the USAPL.
Okay.
The ADFPA became the USAPL, and not to be confused. You know, there's a myriad of federations again, but yeah, the USAPL has a 264 and below. Then it has, you might as well be 500. You know, then they have the Ray Williams, and then they have, you had him on, the huge squatter, a huge lifter, Vanilla Gorilla. You had him on.
Yeah, Blaine Sumner.
Yeah, that's their federation. Now I won't. I was with that federation and believed in it and espoused it, but at the last time I did a strongman announcing job up in Scottsdale, I do the Unbroken Strength Games, which I'll do the first week this year in August. I looked across at the USAPL and I saw they had 5-year-olds squatting axial load in their spine. And I said, no, I don't agree with that. Because when powerlifting started, it was like you had to be a teenager, 14, before you loaded your spine that way. So I don't agree in everything I see.
Yeah.
They're the organization that has that pirate announce things. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't even know that.
There's a person in a pirate costume that announces.
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I'm not a big fan yet. I kind of like former lifters like myself that broadcast and announce.
Yeah.
So that I'll say that. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, like you said, like you can't flex fat, and if you're not healthy, you're going to have a problem. And like you, so I would go to do a USAPL meet. I'm like, okay, I weigh 270, 545 is double body weight. That'd be a new state record. I would squat that, and then I'd pass on my third. They're like, well, go for more. I go, look, if I pop my hamstring, then I can't catch for my daughter this week in softball practice. And I can't drive home with my family in the 120 miles down the I-10. What if I have to change a tire? You know? So when I came back to powerlifting, I was like, what are the records? And I would always I pulled like 628, 633. I benched like low threes because it's all raw. And I'd squat double body weight, and I'd have the record. I did that like 3 years in a row. And then that kind of phased out. Then actually I did one SPF meet. SPF came out here. But do you remember when do you remember Outlaws, the message board?
Yes, the APF Outlaw message board, yeah.
Yeah, so like Tommy Fannin and then Blaine Stussy ran that. Do you remember that?
And then because Billy Mimmo was on her all the time too.
Yeah, there wasn't much, right? But yeah, Blaine became my friend, but sadly he passed away a few years ago of a heart attack. But he was a member of that. But he ran a meet up in Phoenix. I always tried to do a meet a year, and then in 2018, I did my last meet, and then I'm like, you know, I suffered an injury that hampered me forever in my upper body. I guess we can talk injuries if you want, but like it, you know, I'd be, you know, once you tear your pec, you know, it led to, I tore my pec in 2002, got it fixed in 2004. You're not the same when you get something reattached. I mean, I think your body puts a governor on the Golgi tendons or something. You can only go so much. And then on that side, I tore my anterior serratus, and it was like I lost feeling in my fingers, and that was stupid. Just doing overhand deadlifts after all these years, and so injuries kind of forced me out of it. But when you connected with me and said you saw my page, and you're like, "Oh, how old are you? You're in good shape, man." I go to bed, Chad. I'm never in pain.
Yeah,
I like it. I haven't had any lower body surgeries. I've had both pecs reattached, and I caught a runaway squat bar in my elbow from a kneeling squat gone wrong. So I've had my tricep reattached, but came back to bench in the mid threes raw. So like now I just train for fun. Now I get in there and I train for fun, and nature makes all the locks and makes all the keys. So during the pandemic, I was studying. I always had low white blood cells, like below 4 is low and above 10 is high. My white blood cells were really low, like, And when I retired from the government, I sold a year of sick leave back. So I was never sick. I was pretty strong and healthy. But then during the pandemic, I started taking my shirt off halfway through my workout and getting sun out here in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And my white blood cells shot up to 6. My doctor's like, "What did you do?" I go, "Well, I just got sun, vitamin D, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Do you
no
do
pills."
you supplement vitamin D?
In the winter out here, because Arizona has a short winter. I think you referenced in your podcast that you're trying to get to a sunny climate soon. So
Yeah, I'm it's not bad in Reno, but I'm going south even more.
yeah, we get so much sun down here, and I stay on top of it. I get it like a drug, like a hormone boost. Like when you haven't, kids grow in growth spurts when you see that, when you have them, and probably remember, or you don't, but like there's just times your hormones work in a burst. So same thing with
Yeah.
vitamin D for a man. You know, you gotta I think I heard it on Rogan or somebody, but like you got to get vitamin D when you wake up in the morning. I have naturally kind of oily skin. So you got to get it when you have those body oils on you to get your first dose of 15 to 20 minutes. So if I have something to do on my phone or even bills or something, I'll go step outside and I'll get sun while I'm doing it. Even to
Yeah.
go get when it stands, like Stan showed in his 10-minute walks.
Yeah.
I've been doing those forever. And if you want to lose weight, Stan doesn't model this, I don't think. But when I wanted to go from 275 to 264, when they changed that weight class, so I would just put a 25-pound weight vest on. I'd put 10% over my body weight and I'd walk 10 minutes and the weight would just fly off me. Something about a weight vest. I'm not really a heavy sweater, but a weight vest would like make it, calories are just measures of heat. So when you're
Yeah.
carrying more weight, it would burn it off real quick.
Yeah.
Like simple things I would tell people to do. And like, so right now, like how much weight have you lost from your high of 385?
Well, I was down to 285 before I got COVID. Then when I got COVID, I ballooned up to 340. And it took me a while to start losing weight again. It's like COVID did something to my body. And I found that little trifecta of like bromelain and I don't know, it's like 3 supplements. And I took that for a couple months. And then everything started working again. So now I'm back down. I'm down to about 315. I want to get back under 300.
Now, when did you get COVID?
It's probably a year and a half ago.
That's what happened to me. I had they made it mandatory at work to get the vaccination. Then I talked to my doctor. So I got the Moderna twice and then I got a booster. But then I went back for my first and last management conference last June in DC. And I'd been working at the Nationals anyways in Dallas. So I'd been on the road for over a week. That long flight, I got off. I was itchy when I got off the flight. Next day I popped positive for COVID. And for me, it was like it made my back ache like a bad flu. I don't smoke or never didn't have any respiratory issues, but my joints, my joints hurt in my elbow for a while. So that's kind of what I switch when you see my training to the band bell stuff. I do a lot of band bell training. Um, Jimmy Seitzer, one of Louis Simmons' original workout partners, like the Earthquake Bar, the Rhinoflex HD,
Mm-hmm.
like that absorbs stress, and the circumference is a little bit more than it just dissipates stress, so you don't get those points. But like right now, do you have any? I didn't have any weight issues with COVID. I had been down to like 260, and right now I'm about 250.
Yeah,
I did a
I
grip
was
lift.
actually exhausted for months. And I lived my whole life in exhaustion because of my sleep, but I mean, it was bad. Like if I
Oh,
had
wow.
10 or if I had 15 minutes in between clients, I'd come in the house and lay down because
Oh,
I was
wow.
just
Okay.
done. And then I cut back on my eating, but still my weight just shot up. And now I've been feeling better. Like this last 6 months to a year, I've been feeling better. I'm slowly, I'm not in a hurry to drop the weight because I really think that if you want it to last, you need to do it slow and just be patient. So I'm gradually losing and I'm hopefully hit like 310 in the next month or two and I'll hold there for a little while and then gradually go down. But I mean, I don't have any real joint problems or anything like that.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I've seen your training. I've seen it online, and even when you were in, the lunatic fringe stage,
Mm-hmm.
like
I was always
I,
very good about technique. I was very good about movement patterns, my flexibility and my mobility, which I think comes from my physical therapy background, but so even when I was lifting heavy, like I had Juju Mufu on here at one point because he was amazed. He always liked the fact that I could still almost do the splits when I was squatting close to 1,200 pounds.
Wow.
And he pushes hard that powerlifters need to stay mobile and flexible. And I'm like, I think that's a big part of how I walked away from it without any major injuries.
Yeah, I know that once I got into my early 30s and over 300. So I got over 300 when I was 28 in 1996, and I stayed there till '03. Yeah, but then when I started, yeah, I was a 308er in '03. By '04, then I started losing weight and moved. And but to me, the conjugate, the box squats, forcing your lower body down to, I always squatted to a 12-inch box even when I was 6'2". It gets a point where you're doing forced stretching, and it's almost like you look at Hatfield's old stuff. He had PNF stretching and then like partner
Mm-hmm.
facilitated stretching, where they would push each other. And I had done martial arts in my late teens, and like we were stretched and pushed. So I think a lot goes into that, maintaining that flexibility. I could never do the splits like you're talking about, but deficit deadlifts and, just the box squatting really led to just an overhaul of my whole body, if you will, right? It built up a set of hamstrings, and then the conjugate, doing hamstring exercises real heavy. Like there's certain exercises, like for me, Zercher squats were a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I never liked front squats. I didn't like them. They felt terrible. They didn't work for me. They were hard. I got into the low 400s. I felt awkward, felt terrible. But like I did a deep Zercher with 545 once, and I stood up with 6 plates. Now I know online Tom Haviland, he's friends with me online. He trains under Josh, and he sends me messages. He's like,
Guy's
"Yeah,
a beast."
yeah." He credits me. He's like, "Man, he's like, your Zerchers gave me an idea," and he did 700 last year.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I love to see that passed down. But yeah, that guy is definitely.
We used to do some heavy ass Zerchers back in the day.
Yeah, I
Like
would do
it
Zerchers.
would get to where the forearm and like just trying to hold my arms up was the hardest part. Just having that weight in your elbows. But yeah, I'm the same way. I hate front squats. I've always hated front squats. I don't even do front squats anymore because it's just too awkward for me. I think it puts your body in a bad position, but you can do a heavy Zercher. And I think those are great. I think it's a great deadlift developer. I think it's great for squats.
Yes, yeah, and it's at the same time, you have if the bookends you were lifting when you're talking 1,200-pound squat and 800-pound deadlift, like it's not mentally daunting to go in and be like, okay, we're going to go for a 600-pound Zercher because it's extremely heavy, but it's not as heavy as your body's used to feeling. So to me, there was always I love the conjugate. There was always that encore effect. Like, okay, I did this workout. How do I surpass it? Louis would always talk about, different exercises, and totally right. I mean, I don't agree with everything Louis said. And if I'm sure you met him like I did. Like once I met him, I'm like, well, I can see why you love the good mornings. Your back is like a third the length of mine. But that was a good lift for him. And same thing with sumo. I tried sumo, and he always said, "Oh, you should be good at both." I didn't like it. Sumo felt funky on my hamstrings and ways. So not for me. But again, like Louis also taught me kneeling squats, which you don't see anybody do. Like kneeling squats were amazing. You could lower. I did 900 for one. It's on my YouTube. I did a set with 785 for 6, and talk about overloading your hips with the
Mm-hmm.
bar weighted above them and your hamstrings. But at the same time, it's not exhausting because I got to be like, I'll be honest. I think there's more people lifting now, Chad. But you look, my gym was bare bones, and you look at that original West Side that was the Black Windows one. Like these lifters now, like I'll say it, like belt squats and these pendulum squats and these. It's just not. It's not the same. It's not going to that's not going to give you the same effect as a kneeling squat would, which is.
I think a lot of that is, and I think this is with the modern social media and stuff too. I don't think a lot of people know the history that you know and know just how strong some of these older lifters were and how basic their training was. Like they didn't need to do all these different exercises. They didn't need, and I'm a huge fan of specialty bars, But there's a lot of guys that got stronger than shit without all these bars and without all this equipment and without all these machines. I mean, my base of strength was me training in my basement with whatever equipment I could get as a kid.
Yeah, one of the first things I bought from my home gym was a reverse hyper, right? So I bought it and I paid $900 for it and it was shipped. And man, within 6 months, we all were doing it. Our backs were not getting better. So I sold it for a good profit because it was hot commodity. Then what we did was the Demel, as same thing Louis would describe, the Matt Demel program, 25% of your deadlift for 2 sets of 20, 3 times a week in the basically the RDL, the fast deadlift. I did that and I still do it to this day. So even if you're a 600-pound deadlifter, you're only using 135 on it or 125. Do 2 sets of 20 because what it is feeding your hamstrings, which recover real quick. They're so fast twitch, but it's also like restoring your low back, which takes 5 to 7, maybe even longer days to recover because your low back gets no blood supply. And while I was doing those Demel deadlifts, which only take a barbell, you can even do them with dumbbells or kettlebells. You could probably even do them with bands. I mean, like it's the simplest, but simple isn't a bad thing in the strength world. It's sometimes it's the simplest things that counts. And it's just healthier to bend your legs that way. Like I was averaging 100 Demels a week and that kept everything. So, and it was easy to do.
But it was light.
Once I tried to push it one year up to 225 for them, too much. I don't think I ever, even when I was deadlifting 750, 744, 733 years, I never did more than 185.
I think that's one of the things though. And like, I actually love the reverse hyper. That's like one of those pieces of equipment I'll always have. I have an original West Side one. But like, and then you speak about RDLs. It's funny because I love how I can see the term RDL on Instagram and it's performed like all these different ways. So for me, the RDL was always, it's not a straight leg deadlift. You're not trying to bend forward. You're sitting back. You're going just below your knees and then you're exploding up. And it's about the explosion up, keeping that neutral low back arch, using your glutes and hamstrings. But then again, like you said, this goes back to like what I call GPP recovery sessions. You don't have to do a whole lot of weight, but you want the intent of movement. And you can do that within 24 hours of your regular heavy session, and it will literally speed up your recovery so that you can train, you're in better shape for the next session you have coming up. And I think a lot of people forget that there's a lot of progress in lifting light sometimes.
Yeah, I think as you speak to it I think you and like Donnie Thompson always references, he was training 7 days a week to prepare his body. And he espoused a lot of kettlebells, kettlebell swings, which how different than is a kettlebell swing than an RDL?
It's pretty close.
Not much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I look, like Josh said on your podcast, he said, and he talked about Charles Pollock, and I look for more similarities than differences in people. Like,
yes.
What's the mirror? What factors led that person to be strong? And there's no, I see stuff today that I train a few people, not many. I've trained people in person, college football players and professional fighters, some high-level jiu-jitsu athletes. I trained my kids, but I don't post a lot of who I train. And but like I think there's people trying to come up with novelties, like, and I see this one trend I see lately, and I heard this on Dave Tate's podcast the other day, like pause deadlifts. What? Are you what?
It's real popular to pull it just below your knees and stop and then finish the lift.
I pulled my biggest deadlifts doing I got up to 650 drug free, 21 years old at the Nationals, 235. And then I was stuck in the mid sixes. I got over 700 by doing the West Side program. So that all those dynamic effort box squats built my hamstrings. Mm-hmm. I learned the Zerchers. There's nothing that's going to build your ab strength like Zerchers. It'll build a cast iron stomach like Alexiev, right? Mm-hmm. And then I learned how to train hamstrings correctly and kneeling squats. I learned how to lower the bar, those exercises and pull throughs. Like that Uptown gym I was a member of had a 440-pound cable stack and had this dual handles. And I eventually moved one of those stacks to my garage in Yorba Linda. And like you could go out and I could, even when I weighed 300 pounds, I could have 440 on that and do pull throughs. So it was like, it was stretching and it was like, it's not a lot different than kettlebells or sumo
Yeah.
deadlift, but it was an exercise. You know, you got to find out what works for me. And let me ask you this, Chad, one of the things as we talk, like I say I was 6'2.5", and I at my physical this year, my doctor said I was right under 6'1". So I haven't had surgery or anything. And I squatted 900 in the gym a couple times and stood up with over 800 a bunch of times in meets. Like, how tall are you, Chad?
Right now, we actually just measured the other day, and I'm like 6.5 feet or something, and I think I was like 6'1.5" when I was lifting. But I think I was actually tall when I was lifting heavier. I got taller.
Right. But my point of that is like a lot of this stuff online is like I was a teenager or maybe 20 when I went for my first Ed Cohen seminar. He came to Massachusetts and you're like, oh my God, I'd seen this guy on tape and in pictures. He's like, God, well, I'd say to Ed right now, you're 5'6". So when you see the same thing with Louis. So, and we talked before this went live, like John Hack, it's amazing. I think he's 5'9". And again, he's another one to get back to your point. He was on Dave Tate recently. He's been on the Under the Bar a couple times, which is a fantastic podcast like yours is. But John referenced he went and trained high level strongman, and then look what a boost it had in his powerlifting. He deadlifted 939 last month officially at 212.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
but excuse me, it's from doing more work, sled drags, farmer's walk, right? When
But
you
I
do more
think
work.
it's interesting because I think about this a lot because I think back what I did and how I was training when I did it and what could I have done different in terms of like knowledge. And I do think that it's kind of like when a guy goes, "Oh, I train 7 days a week." Well, my first thought is, well, what do you consider training? Like I train what I consider serious sessions a week. But then I try to train every day. But those ones are like lighter sessions. So I think like I would be interested to know how Hack is actually training. And like, yeah, if you go do a sled session that takes you 20 or 30 minutes, but it's not really heavy, it's still training and it has a great reward to it. Like I'm thinking more and more that we need less really heavy sessions and more of the lighter sessions.
Yeah, I do believe it becomes self-governing when you're being honest, right? When you're chasing progress. Like at my best, when I was 325 and I totaled over 2,000 the first time, Thursday night was heavy bench. Friday we were off. It was eating, a lot of eating. Sometimes I'd meet Art. I worked for the government, but I make my schedule, so I was kind of near Art in Orange County. We'd go to a place called Sumo Sushi, and 10,000 calories was very common.
Yeah.
We had a doctor that was very friendly with us. We'd go get an IV possibly in the hotter months. IV is totally legal and makes you feel great. And then Saturday morning, it was game on at 9. It was game on. We're definitely going to squat heavy. And I got my most success out of this West Side Barbell percentage speed deadlifts, 65 to 82%, 82% to speeds, speed singles.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I do that Saturdays getting ready for meet. Sometimes I do that another day during the week. It depended. I didn't get a lot of success on progressive overloading deadlifting once I get into the high sixes, but sometimes my guys did. So if they were there training their deadlift, I'd be doing something else because it's my gym, right? My garage. But yeah, no, and then that would be Saturday. And then Monday, sometimes speed bench, sometimes not. And Tuesday would have been a speed squat workout, upper back. And I couldn't even get during the week, I couldn't get all my power lifters at my house. Sometimes I couldn't even get to my house. It would be with Kevin Kinsey over in Downey. That's halfway between my work and home. And we'd do a speed squat workout with safety squat bar and bands, and then maybe my speed deadlifts and some rows. It was at my strongest, I was training hard 3 days a week. Mm-hmm. And then I had work and life. And again, I would walk a lot. I wasn't doing cardio per se, like jump on a bike, but I would walk the stairs, walk the ramps, always walk. I like to walk. I like to go to the beach and goof around in the surf. And that period of my life. And when that was that season, I would go to football games. I wasn't just going to sit at home and do nothing. I wasn't the best house cleaner, but I kept up some stuff. But I was active. Yeah. And now, like, I'm sponsored. They sent the nice folks at the Strong Neck sent me a Strong Neck apparatus, so I consider them kind of my sponsor, if you will. But like you can, it's funny. You look at the body how it articulates itself. The areas furthest away from the heart and the body, you can train more. You can probably train your grips and forearm and hands more. If you look at how these champion arm wrestlers, and I'm now affiliated with Arm Lifting USA and Ricardo Magni. He brought me to the Arnold this year, and I'm running my own grip contests here in Arizona. Please check that stuff out on armliftingusa.com. But I think you can train your grip more often, right?
Yeah.
Definitely calves.
Well, your forearms, your calves they'll take a beating and still come back.
Yeah, you take them for granted, kind of. So you can do those. And I do my neck. I found when I got real busy in that period of my life, when my 3 kids were in high school and my wife started working and I was busy with work, I'd be like walking down the hall at work and I'd get like a stabbing pain in my neck. And I'm like, man. And then I realized, man, I hadn't done any net work. I went in and I did 3 heavy squat singles or 3 heavy bench singles like Westside's max effort. And then I got to work. And I'm like, man, so neck is one thing I've had to and I love to train it. Like I feel more awake. I feel more, even if I'm, like you said, you do something every day. I do neck every day. Josh Bryant has on, and I have some clips on my YouTube and my Instagram, Paul L, or my Instagram page. And like, I pump blood in it and it's like an energy drink. My eyes get open. I'm like, wow, this is,
well, I mean, if you stop and think about it, if I'm working my forearms and they get pumped up, I'm pumping blood through my whole body. Like that blood can't just get to my forearms, So even if you're doing something small and you're working just your grip, you're still pumping a bunch of blood through your body, which means nutrients is going through your whole body.
Yeah. And being a student in the game, like I studied a lot of like Bill Pearl. Bill Pearl was, he was known as a bodybuilder and a very strong one, but like when Kaz was inducted into the Arnold Hall of Fame, he referenced Bill Pearl, taught him the keys to the universe is Bill's book of 700 exercises. Bill says it best. He's like, hey, your body doesn't care how the blood got pumping. It just cares that it does.
Mm-hmm.
But, when we were top level strength athletes and you were world class, like my thing was I learned to do enough work, but not to have anything interfere with my main workouts. That was it. Like in order to avoid lazy,
all that other stuff should be a supplement or helping your main workouts.
Yes. I had a mountain bike for years. I would ride and I liked that. I've always had dogs. Like Louis Simmons had dogs, but I had dogs and the dogs love to be walked. And if you looked at them, it kind of pushed you a little bit to walk them like, hey, but that's use it or lose it, right? I had a bull mastiff that was almost 200 pounds. You better walk him. I had a boxer that, oh my goodness, I walked him and then I found a pen. I used to let him just, let out that energy, buddy, like lightning. I had an English bulldog for years that kept me going. And I love those dogs, but they need to be walked. And then here in the desert, can't walk them in the middle of the day. So I'd have to get up early, walk them before 6 a.m. We're light early out here. Walk them, and then usually later in the day before bed, walk them again. Like it was good for both of us, right? Like
I think
it was a symbiotic relationship.
One of the things that I learned, because I eventually on the regular West Side split, me and everybody on my team, we could go about 3, maybe 4 weeks, and we would all go to shit. And that's where I started going, wait a minute, we're not getting enough recovery. Like, everybody's eating good. Everybody's trying to get their sleep except for me. But, I go, something's wrong. And I ended up talking to Dave and he pointed out that I have my own logic, but I'm not following my logic. And so that's when I started spreading things out. And I happened to talk to Louis about like the timed work that they were doing and the recovery work. And I started, because I needed to be in the gym. I was always in the gym. Like that was what kept me sane at that time. So that's when I started doing the recovery sessions and these light sessions. And they were a little annoying because I would go to the gym and not lift anything heavy. And that was very foreign to me. Mm-hmm. But at least I was in the gym. And then I kind of started going, wait, I'm doing these stupid sessions and it feels dumb to me and I hate them, but I'm recovering faster. Like, so maybe there's something to, maybe I don't have to lift insanely heavy all the time to get a benefit.
Yeah, I was definitely influenced by Westside, and they helped. I came upon that information when I was 25 by myself, wanted to train hard, and they helped a lot. And then I built out my gym, and I got guys with like again Art LeBear, who Art LeBear out totaled me, came in second in the WPO, was a national champion. But Art had started under Terry McCormick, who was a world champion, and Dave Shaw was a world champion. They'd started Bill Kazmaier. So Art definitely influenced me heavily, because it's like you said, it's the good thing is go to these meets and meet people. So I did the APF and I totaled elite 98. Then my wife got pregnant, so I didn't go to seniors in 99. Sadly, she miscarried and my dad had passed away. It was a bad year. So late in 99, I did my one and only IPA. The IPA had stood up at York, Pennsylvania. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do that. So Art's like, man, I can't make it. It's the week before Thanksgiving. I can't go. I'm like, all right, I'll go by myself. But online, I've been friends with Bob Youngs. Remember Bob
Oh
Youngs?
yeah, I was very close to Bob.
Yes, sadly, he's no longer with us, but he was from Connecticut, but he was there at Westside. So he would provide me with inside info. You're like, remember secrets coming out of Westside? You'd be like, so he would he's like, I'll help you when you're here, Paul. I'll handle you. I'll help you. What? And so I get there and he introduced me to Jimmy Ritchie, who was a hell of a lifter there. Those guys were super nice. So I'm in the warm-up room warming up with them, and Matt Smith is next to me, and Louis there. So I warm up. I'm going to open with 750, and I think Matt was going to be too. So I smoke 633 with just 635, something like that's on the bar. I smoke it, good squatting, and Louis like, good squat. And then like Matt Smith goes and gets buried, and I see all those West Side guys get in his face like, you're not gonna embarrass us. Louis like, I might not even let you lift. And I did think I out total Matt, but my point of that is Matt went on later to like win the WPO and stuff. But there's a lot you can see, like Yogi Berra said, there's a lot you can see by observing. And so I was like, well, there's not all this mystique on these West Side guys. They're just average that work really hard and work kind of smart, right? I would say Matt developed some of the best set of hips, and I think he's had them replaced. But like he developed some of the best set of hips ever after that moment in 99. That was November 99. He went on to, I'm sure you had some battles with Matt, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
because
I ended up out totaling Matt.
But he way out totaled me is my point. But like, so I'm looking at him, I'm like, well, there's not all this mystique. Because then my point is I'd go back and like Art LeBear would teach me things, and he was kind of old school. And then Josh came into the picture, and Josh was, I mean, we found Josh through, God bless Chuck LaMancha. Chuck LaMancha used to be the announcer at all Steve Dennison's meets. He passed away from COVID. COVID killed him. But he was a great guy, and he loved powerlifting, but he was also the host of those powerlifter video magazines.
Yes, I remember those.
Because I did a couple pieces for them, and that was a Ned Lowe's. It was more West Coast centric and down in California, but they would have West Side pieces on there and stuff. So I was like, my point and we would make is like, go to meets and meet people and go to the best gyms you can, but don't hold anybody as your God until you see what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
And get a myriad of sources. Cause this is, again, there was people in the 60s. I mean, Pat Casey, who I got to be at his Hall of Fame induction, Pat Casey benched 617 in 1966. And the first guy to squat 800. I mean, so there have been strong people raw for a long time. And now the gear is there's, do it all, have fun with it. This is supposed to be fun, right, Chad? I mean, you got some sponsorship. I had a few little sponsors, but it gave me a lifetime of experiences that are priceless.
Oh, I talk all the time about the lessons I learned in the gym that have helped me in life that are just astronomical. And I think we need to do more. I think we need to spend a little more time going back and looking in history and trying to figure out what those guys were actually doing. Because like you said, so Pat Casey hit 617. Dude, a 617 raw bench is still huge. Right. And he did the first 800-pound squat. So you can't tell me that what he did was not the best. Like what he did, there's a lot of validity to the way he trained and stuff to get that strong back then. to where even to this date, those numbers are still insanely impressive. So I'm always curious to go, because I really have being a blue collar guy, I have a very keep it simple, stupid attitude. I'm like, let's not complicate this. We're just lifting heavy shit. So let's always go to the simplest base that we can, and then maybe kind of build from there. And from what I know of the older legends in the sports, they didn't complicate it as much as we complicate it now.
Right. No, I look back, and hindsight's always 2020. And I look back on, when I try to give people advice, I say that, like Louis says, everything works, nothing works forever. I think Louis was famous for saying too, there's no off season. You should always be within 90%. And I
Mm-hmm.
disagree with some of the things Louis says. I disagree that you should compete as a master, because I do that. And I still believe in that, but do open too. Support the meet. When you have the money, support the meet director, pay every division. It's not trophy hunting, or now they don't even give out trophies. They give out medals, but you know what I'm saying? So that's what I used to do. Enter every division I could, because I'm supporting the meet director or whatever. But yeah, like you look at like a Larry Pacifico, 9-time world champion. Larry bench 590 at 228 raw.
Yeah.
And then you see and then if you ever see him in his physique in person, you're like, look, yeah, he was involved in PEDs, but obviously he's still alive in his 70s, and he did it to the talk about getting. I mean, Fred Hatfield. When I met Fred, like nobody got more out of the genetics than Fred. Like when I met him in person, I was shocked. I was like, whatever you say, Fred, yes. And I tell anybody, buy his books, go online, buy his old. He's amazing, his information. And Louis would talk about him. Him and Louis were the only two that I think total elite in 5 weight classes, which is amazing. But Larry Pacifico, anybody that Louis praised, Larry Pacifico, Fred Hatfield, John Cole. When I got that footage of John Cole that's on my YouTube, Paul L, of his 905 squat and 580 bench and close miss at 605 in 1972. I sent that to Bob Youngs, and he played it for Louis, and Louis loved it.
Yeah.
You know, like there definitely needs to be an awareness of a lot have gone before you, and some are really a lot stronger.
Yeah.
You know, don't take an ego bite. And now, back then there was no strongman. So strongman is definitely, you know, my friend Willie Wessels that runs USS, he's done 1,000 strongman competitions in the last 20 years, and it's growing. I'm broadcasting the Nationals in Denver this year. There's over 600 athletes that Justin and Kate Menning out of Iron Titan Barbell have signed up. So that sport's growing, but that's dissipated a lot of those guys would have been top powerlifters back in the day. So be that as it may, I'm all for doing both. And I think I'm proof you can do both sports at a relatively good level, and certainly had a blast. But yeah, you make a hybrid athlete of the strongman training with the powerlifting basis of hitting big, heavy squats, deadlifts, and bench presses, even bench press. Don't get rid of the bench press. That's a huge.
I think too, because I've trained a couple strongmen too, and I'm like, you need to be proficient at the events, so you have to train the events. You don't always have to train them super heavy though. Like if you have the base of strength, like I honestly didn't train full heavy squats hardly at all. I did a lot of other movements, but I had the squat down enough, and my technique was good enough that I didn't have to train it all the time. And I think like you could add, I think like lighter strongman events are great for GPP and recovery days. And you can still, but just because it's light, you always, and I was talking to this Ed Cohen, I said that, I think it was Ernie France, and then Ed Cohen said, no, I said that. So I don't know who said it. It probably was Ed Cohen, but treat the lightweights like they're heavy and the heavyweights like they're light. You know,
yeah,
so
that's in Franz's book. Yeah.
Yeah, even when you have lightweight, you need to have intent and focus on the technique and the movement patterns.
Yeah, if I was to do it again, I would be more of a hybrid athlete in that I would do strongman for GPP. I would do farmers, but I would, like Louis said, everything works, nothing works forever. What I would do is, for me to get my biggest squat, I had to squat heavy. But what I would do, I would come in and do the max effort method. And I would do like 3 heavy box squats. And when I went to Chicago and squatted 777 my first time to get elite, I was doing like, I'd come in and like do 585, 605. Maybe I did 625 with a belt, briefs, and knee wraps to a 12-inch box. Then I went to Chicago and put on my canvas suit. I didn't even train in it. I probably would have trained in more gear back if I was getting ready for a geared meet, like a football player wears shoulder pads, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, you live and learn. But in retrospect, it was, if you did the West Side like you did, like if you did the West Side full on, which I did for a couple years, but then when I get guys coming to my garage, I got away from the speed work, and but we always had a heavy squat day and a heavy bench day. I probably would have cycled more speed work like for the off season and considered off season and given us a break, like to go back, because you don't always need to handle a heavy weight in the traditional powerlifting discipline to dominate at it. You can do boards or floors or inclines or close grips.
Well, yeah, and again, like everything else, when you're new, you can handle more stress. As you get stronger, you're going to need more time to recover. As you're older, your technique's pretty good and it's set. When you're younger, you got to do the main lifts. You got to build that base and that technique. And it continually changes throughout your career. And I'm sure as I know, as I get older, things are changing again. So certain things that did work might be too much now, or might not even be enough now.
Yeah, you of course, your brain is your best computer, right? Like the feedback you get, how you feel, like you referenced earlier, we were talking, like it's hard to totally coach someone online because you don't even know. Like a good coach will say, well, this guy, I just watched how this guy got out of his car, and they might call it a functional movement screen, but this guy got out of his car and I can see something's not right. Maybe his girlfriend, maybe his wife's, maybe he's got a sick family member. God knows. I thought my life was together till I had teenagers. Be that there's a myriad of factors. Times when a dog can die, a training partner, you can be really bummed out. I joke that like I never was bummed out over a woman. I had 2 long-term relationships in the course of 40 years. Like one of my training partners came to me once and says, man, I can't do this anymore. My wife doesn't want. I'm like, I was so sad. In retrospect, I was like, man, you're breaking up the band.
Yeah.
It's a sad deal. I'm like, dude, we got something. No, she's sick of me being tired. She's sick of me being, that's what like nowadays, if you meet people, they talk about this sacrifice, and we just took it for granted. Like I love living in Southern California. I got there the first 3 or 4 years. It was party time. I graduated college. I was a new agent. I partied. I saw a lot of things, saw a lot of neat things, but then it just kept bugging me. I'm like, man, I miss being strong. Like I miss powerlifting. I never not did lift, but then I just made my own scene out there. I'm like, man, I'm going to build the best garage gym I can, and I did. It was well worth it. What are you forsaking? Well, again, the greatest PD in the world is sleep. So you had to say, I'm not going to go out tonight. I'm going to stay home. Or, it's not chasing the girls or guys for you girls, but it's you got to find one so you can settle down and relax. It's staying out till 2:30 in the morning and hoping. And nowadays, I don't think people's lives ends with these dumb phones, right? They're probably looking at stuff all the time. And just shut that. I didn't have that. I didn't even have a phone for years.
Steve Pusinella, he posted one this morning that was like about people using phones in between their lifts, and if he thinks it's good or bad. And I thought that's such an I had never thought about it till I read his post. And I'm like when I was a kid, you just sat there thinking about your next set. And nowadays you're like, oh, I got to distract myself. So you get on your phone in between sets and you're like, wait a minute, that's kind of stupid.
Yeah, I do think whatever you call it, the OODA loop or something, they gave us some training at work like that how to distract somebody if you have to. I do think that's a real thing. I do think there's lack of concentration now. And I think there's, what do they say? A swipe right, swipe left generation. And Twitter. I'm not a Twitter guy, but Instagram they'll play a reel if it's under a minute. So the attention span and from someone that's, I did write a book, and I got hacked at 5,500 Instagram followers like a year and a half ago. Now I've learned my lesson. I'm double verified and I haven't got hacked yet. And I have 3,200 followers. Right. And I'll be going back and forth with something like, well, I'll forget. I'm like, what did you read about in my book? Oh, you have a book? So Yeah, I have a book, and it's not a pitch, but like, yeah, it's my third. It's when I wrote that, it was 30 something years of experience, and other people like I read at night before bed, and I read 1,000 things, Chad, before I thought I had the right to write one thing.
Right.
And like nowadays, everybody has an opinion, everybody matters. Yeah, I do think there's a huge distraction, and the idea when I see people, if you're getting ready for a meet and you need your own song, no, all hell could break loose. There could be a misload before you. When I was at the IPA, I think it was Brent Tracy got hurt. The bar hit the floor for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go warm up. I just had to sit back and it was indoors. It was warm. Just stay warm and keep your mental focus. Okay, I'm going to go squat. Like all hell can break loose. So don't make it so controlled like that.
Yeah,
And,
I kind of get irritated with the music and the headphones and have to listen to this and like you said, when I did my 12:21 attempt, Mark Bartley had crashed with 1,000 before that. So
horribly.
I had to wait for the ambulance to come. I had to wait for them to check him out, and he had to go to the hospital. And like, I don't even remember how long it was. And everybody just kind of assumed that I wasn't going to take my last attempt. And I'm like, oh no, I'm taking this attempt. I don't care. Like, and you got to be ready for that shit. You got to be ready for anything can happen in a competition.
Yeah. And by the time I got to a competition, to be honest with you, yes, one time I took the bar off because I was still squatting USPF once my wife got pregnant with twins. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm not traveling as much, but California USPF was great. Right. So they had the Central Cal meet every year, and the East Beach on Santa Barbara Beach I got to do. So I had meets that were meant enough to me that they weren't nationals, but I was still squatting with this traditional one bar for every event.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why if you see me, this shoulder the pec was reattached. It's a myriad of a history, but yeah, I took a bar out at the Central Cal, and it was Gene Estrada's big meet in October, like Columbus Day weekend. It's a tradition, the whole town comes out for this media. There's a pancake breakfast. I don't know if you ever did that, and I don't think it doesn't exist anymore, or maybe the Central Cal doesn't name, but the Central Cal in San Luis Obispo was an awesome meet. So I opened up, then I went 766 for my second, and the bar's kind of crooked, and I go down and I pop that knee, and they take it. I miss it. I'm limping around. I'm like, ugh. And then I had done 500 in the APF, but not the USPF. I'm like, no, I'm ready to do a 500 bench. And I didn't. I did like 480. I didn't pull out of the meet, but I couldn't bend my leg. And then they said, oh, you need 580 to deadlift to win it. So I did like the most awkward, it looks like a Cossack squat. Like one leg's out to the side. I bent over and deadlifted it. I'm like, is this good? And then I went, I didn't have knee surgery, and that's what led me to strongman. But like the meets were easy. Our training was living hell. I'm telling you. And the 10 minutes of terror, the dynamic squat workouts lift you like it was a fist fight. Like, if training's the right way, meets should not be. I got hurt once. I tore my both pecs on raw benches in the gym. One time going too wide stupidly. The other time was just a mental gaffe. And then I got hurt where I run away squat bar. But when I was in the meet, I wasn't afraid. And it was a different, I didn't do the big WPOs, but when I did the APF seniors, they would have good spotters. But when you went to a local meet, when I was at my best, 7s, 8s, my boys were my spotters, and there was no questions asked. They knew me. You know what I'm saying? Nowadays, you can't do that, right? Remember when you could bring your own spotters?
Yeah.
And you were a spotter too. If Art LeBaire was going to go, I'm up there.
Oh, I was actually, I posted one of the videos the other day at like my first 800 or something. And I commented how it's other lifters that are spotting. Like people that are competing that day are also spotting.
Yeah, and it would be nothing for me to be at a meet, like jump up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let my brother go, and because I respected it. Yeah, no, that's why they call it a meet, right? We're all getting together to determine. And if you need a hand, let me be, and I will save your back. If that bar, I'm going to do all I can to save your life for that bar. You know what I'm saying? And if it goes out, rest assured, go into that meet not worried. Yeah, no, I don't think. Now it's a little different. They have crews and so forth. But here in the state of Arizona, the crews they have they pay a professional crew to do it. They're good. So good for them, right? They have an opportunity. But yeah, I'm like you, man. Anything I can do to help, and get out there. But yeah, I was never afraid. I would joke. I'd go up there. I'm like, hey, I'm going for one. Have some fun with
I
it.
just want to get one. Yeah,
Yeah. And I'd
I
hit
was.
some,
I mean, I was never afraid of the meat, but I get pretty pumped up, and
yeah.
I let my ego run wild when I'm on the platform. So yeah, I have no fear of nothing. I've done meets where like I went down with 1,052 at AWPC Worlds and tweaked my knee and still finished the meet. I'm like, no, I'm not backing down. Like I'm finishing this meet. Like I don't care.
Right. Right. Oh yeah, no, I'm here, and my teammates were there. Everybody was watching, and I changed my mindset when it was I'd bring my family to meets and it was USAPL, right? Like I was not afraid to tear a pec or tear something again, but I did. I would get the state record in the squat. I did that 3 years in a row, just double body weight, drug free squat that I did by training myself in my garage at 6 a.m. by box squats. And then I'm like, okay, 545, 550. I probably could have done 600 raw, clean, 275. But what if I did pop something? Because I did
Well,
what, uh-huh.
I mean, we're older, light, we're in a different place. Like, yeah, there's
Well,
the question of what I did once before isn't necessarily what I'm going to do now.
yeah. And I liken it to like I had my first child when I was 32 and I totaled elite and I started losing weight already to get healthier. But like, if you ever see the movie The Grinch, where at the end his heart grows, right? Like when you're an athlete, your selfish heart shrinks real slow.
Yeah.
You know, my wife was great about that. And then the final straw was when I tore my pec. I was in a sling. I was in a sling, right? And I had twins, and I was changing diapers. The boy pees on you, but you're holding them on the table with your face. You only have one hand. I'm not gonna. Same thing with your daughter. It's like the whole thing. I'm like, you couldn't be more selfish than have twins with a sling. And I'm like, okay, this is. And then to reference your sleep, right? Like I learned again the hard way. So I had twins. It was right after 9/11. I'll give you if you got a minute, I'll give you a war story,
Mhm.
but you can appreciate sleep. So my sleep wasn't as bad as yours, but we were doing a prison case up in Victorville outside of LA. It's 100 miles outside of LA. My boss says, hey, we got a guy that works at the prison, supposedly a terroristic threat, and his wife's cooperating with us. When he goes to work tonight, we're going to go search his house. So I'm like, okay. And so I had 3 kids at home under the age of, and I had my twins were maybe 4 or 5 months old. So I told my wife, I said, let me sleep. I got to work tonight. We got to go in at like 6 at night and work overnight. We're looking at this terrorist. Okay. So my neighbor next door, that's the day he's getting his roof on his house. So I heard plenty of interesting songs coming out of the boombox. You can imagine. I didn't sleep. I'm like, oh my God. So I drive out there, and I wasn't a coffee drinker. Anyways, I drive out there. He goes to work. We're searching the house. I'm in the garage, and I'm mad. And I kick this box, and it falls over, and there's all these explosives there. My partner looks at me, and he goes, oh shit. And I'm like, I think that's bad, right? So let's back out. And he had been in the military. He'd stolen all these charges from the Port Hueneme Naval Base. That was all C4. Thank God it didn't go off. So I back up and we call the bomb squad. We're out in San Bernardino. So those boys, I'll give credit. They don't run to danger. Like 5 hours later, they show up. You guys, the sun's coming up. I'm like, nothing to see here. We didn't blow up, boys. So they go in. They're like, you're lucky. Who kicked that? I'm like, well, I was just making it clear. They go, you're lucky that didn't blow up. It was all bombs. So I've been up like 24 hours, and it was like the sun was coming up. It was the fall, and everyone I was working with was like, hey, let's go to Denny's. You need some coffee. I go, nope. So I started driving home over the Grapevine, and I fell asleep. And I woke up. It was like that Texas Chainsaw Massacre one where he's saw in the car sparks, the airbags open. I skidded. My door was all like I fell asleep at the wheel, and that was like I said this. I got to stop. I was trying to train too hard still and work too hard, and I realized like I got to slow down. So I kind of shifted it into a different gear because I'm like my kids weren't even out of diapers yet. I'm like, man, they need a dad.
Yeah.
Because work was demanding, and but like without sleep, and I got off of ephedrine. I weaned myself off of ephedrine long before it was illegal. Because you remember Remember Ultimate Orange?
Ultimate Orange. I remember what was the hot stuff?
Oh yeah.
But there was one that, like, the first hydroxy cut, which was supposed to lean you out, but I didn't give two shits about the leaning out part. I'm like, dude, if I pop like 5 of these, I have great training sessions.
Yeah. Yeah, I never did anything illegal, but anything over the counter, you thought, oh, this would be fine. Good Lord, what was in that stuff? Now they've saved us from
Well,
ourselves.
you used to be able to get GHB, which is basically the date rape drug, at GNC.
Yeah, I worked at GNC, and but I worked there from 88 to 91. Then I graduated college and became an agent, and then I didn't. But our big seller when I worked at GNC, Chad, was inositol. You know what that is? So inositol, B vitamins are dirt cheap because they're a byproduct of wheat production, but inositol is pure powder. So GNC would sell a 2-ounce bottle of inositol for $99. You can imagine what they were cutting with that, right? Because I would go to pull the grate at 9:00 at my mall, and I would get someone come in. Do you have the tall? Do you have the tall? I go, yep. They'd send you $110 with tax, and that was going to be go cut for whatever party favor they had.
Huh.
But it was funny. Working in GNC is hilarious, the stuff you see. And that could be a whole other show, the supplement industry. But some good, some bad. But like you said, it comes and goes,
Yeah, I think we'll wrap this one up. But I would like to have you back on again. I'd still like to get a little deeper into kind of the old school. And if, like, I'm interested in their mindset of, like, some of these, like John Cole and Hatfield, and because, I didn't get the chance to meet any of those guys. And I just, the more I research, the more I look into it, the more I meet athletes. Like there's, and I just wrote an article for Elite FTS that just got published about the mindset. And I still, like, when I was in a warm-up room at the WPO, and it literally is 20 of the best super heavyweights in the world. Maybe 1 or 2 guys couldn't make it. The one common ground was their mindsets. Like, they all had this mindset of, like, no, I'm going to get where I want to go, period. And I think that I'm just curious to see if that followed through to all these old legends in the sport as well.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do volume 2. Like I told you, I'm getting ready to go to the Nationals. I'm looking forward to this. Has been an honor to be on. We can do this regularly. I look forward to it. Yeah, and I'll close that thought with what we'll discuss when we pick it up next time. Was every strong person I've ever met, and like my garage was a synthesis of different mindsets, from Brian Meek to Art LeBaire to young Josh Bryant. And the internet was just taken off, but we were getting information. There were 3 powerlifting magazines, but every strong person I ever met believed in wholeheartedly what they were doing. They had a belief beyond. Now, if they might show up at contests and it might not have gone their way, but they certainly believed how they got there. They were like, they believed what they were doing worked 100%. And that's huge. They believed in themselves to the point of, I loved cocky and arrogant if you earned it.
Yeah.
If I saw you, some of the things I heard on the platform, yeah, you guys all think you're all judges, but you're just witnesses to my greatness. I would be like, ooh, what a set. I don't want to tell you who said, I'm like, what a set, not profane. They can't kick them off. I'm like, I like that.
That's awesome.
I love that. So, yeah. So, let's pick that up next time, and we'll talk. And I appreciate this, Chad. You do great work keeping the old people like me. They're just a huge fan. Again, if I had a tagline, it was like, man, there were a lot of people stronger than me, but nobody had more fun.
Yeah.
And I love being around strong people. I look up to people such as yourself, and I appreciate what you're doing. And this is an honor. And I look forward to volume 2.
Oh, it was an honor to have you on. I look forward to the next one too. All right, sir. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for listening to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast. For more information, please visit CourageBarbell.com. Until next time.